Gun of a Preacher Man. My name is Liandra Pires. I am the president of the Brady, Bergen County chapter and former chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, UUFANJ. A house of worship is traditionally the last place we expect to hear about guns and violence. Churches are sanctuaries, places of refuge and safety, set apart from the profane, ordinary world. Assad Nawabi, leader of the Louisville Mosque, said, "It's not a place to promote weapons. It's a place for people to come in and worship and connect to God. It is not a place to come in and learn how to fight. A church, a mosque, or a synagogue should be a place of peace and a place of worship, and not a place to promote violence or weapons." It may be difficult for us in suburban progressive communities to understand why some preachers speak in church about the need for guns and violence. We believe in UUCP's motto, unity in diversity, but not everyone feels that way. In fact, quite the contrary. The white Christian nationalist churches have a different worldview. They believe in the philosophy of us, good, and them, evil. And it is imperative for them to fight evil for the preservation of what they believe is right. Psalm 144:1. Praise be to the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, in whom I take refuge, who subdues peoples under me. White Christian nationalists believe they have a God-given right to bear arms. Using weapons is at once a patriotic and a religious act. For those who hold guns to be sacred, the meaning of firearms proceeds from their place at the intersection of American and Christian identities. Proposing limits on what kinds of guns they should be able to buy, or how, when, where, and why they can carry them, is akin to proposing limits on who they are and what they should revere. For many American Christian nationalists, Jesus, guns, and the Constitution are stitched together as durably as a Kevlar vest. White Christian nationalism in the United States traces back to the late 1600s. Adherents believe in the idea that America was founded by Christians who modeled its laws and institutions after Protestant ideals with a mission to spread the religion and those ideals in the face of threats from outside forces, non-whites, non-Christians, heightened immigration, or periods of economic instability. When people hear the phrase white Christian nationalism in the news, they do not always get the correct meaning. A common misunderstanding is that white Christian nationalism is the same thing as being a patriotic Christian. Patriotism is an adherence to the ideals of the United States, and nationalism is loyalty to your tribe and not the country, said Philip Gorski, chair of the Department of Sociology at Yale. According to 2017 Pew Research, 41% of white evangelicals own a gun compared to 30% of Americans overall. That's the highest share of any religious group. Across the country, they account for a significant share, not only for the demand, but for the supply. The holy trinity of white Christian nationalism is freedom, order, and violence. Because guns are essential to their identity, gun rights are held sacred above every other right. Guns are a symbol of freedom and self-defense. They may view the right to bear arms as a fundamental part of our country's heritage and a necessary safeguard against tyranny and oppression. There are gun owners for whom a gun is just a gun, but many don't just own guns, they believe in them. They believe the stories told about guns' power, their necessity, their righteousness. Gun ownership offers a sense of moral purpose to white males who have lost or fear losing their economic footing. In this way, the Second Amendment provides a sense of identity that is both religious and patriotic without being explicitly tied to any one organization or denomination. Guns offer a sense of identity compared to a sense of self, previously rooted in religious ideology. The May 14th, 2022 grocery store massacre in Buffalo, New York was a demonstration of how white Christian nationalist ideology energizes all kinds of violence. The shooter argued in his manifesto that it takes white genes and being a member of white culture to be truly white and therefore part of the normative race in America. He is saying what I really value is whiteness as characterized by this religion of Christianity. What I really value, as he goes about perpetrating this act of violence on people he feels falls outside the boundaries of whiteness. White Christian nationalism is tied up in this and in who has a right to live, who has a right to be in our country. Luke 11:21-22. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted and divides his spoil. Among white Americans who believe the United States should be a Christian nation, 82% believe the best way to stop bad guys with guns is to have good guys with guns. A week after the mass killing of 20 children and 6 educators at Sandy Hook Elementary, Wayne LaPierre, CEO of the National Rifle Association, declared in a nationally televised press statement, "The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. A safer nation lies A safer nation lies in the hope of every good guy being armed all the time. So bring your guns to church." To imagine yourself as a good guy with a gun may inspire action movie daydreams, but is ultimately a religious vision of a world in which good and evil are at war, where God and firepower make all the difference. The goal isn't to rid the country of gun violence. The goal is to suppress bad guy violence with righteous violence, our violence, and that requires guns. White Christian nationalism is ultimately about controlling who gets access to cultural and political power, and thus is fundamentally anti-democratic. Access to guns is about protecting the freedoms of white conservatives to suppress disorder. This philosophy is referred to as the sheepdog mentality, or the idea that good guys with guns have a duty to protect those who are vulnerable. The concept was popularized in the 2015 film American Sniper, where the father of the main character, Chris Kyle, tells his family that there are 3 types of people in this world: sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. In this scenario, Kyle's father says, the sheep pretend that evil doesn't exist and don't know how to protect themselves. Wolves use violence to prey on others. Then there are those who have been blessed with the gift of aggression and overpowering need to protect the flock. These men are a rare breed who live to confront the wolf. They are the sheepdog. Questions surrounding God and guns made headlines after a Christian crowdfunding site collected more than $480,000 in legal defense funds for Kyle Rittenhouse, 17, who was charged with killing 2 protesters and injuring another one with an AR-15 style rifle after he traveled to the racial justice demonstrations in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Organizers of the campaign urged visitors to support Rittenhouse so they could give back to someone who bravely tried to defend his community. But critics question why people who claim to worship Jesus Christ, who taught his followers to turn the other cheek, and warned that those who pick up the sword would die by the sword, would rush to the aid of someone accused of crossing state lines to commit a double homicide. In many Americans, there seems to exist a bizarre mixture not to put faith in God, but to trust in firearms. How can one combine the peaceful message of the Bible with the holy faith in weaponry? This is the world we're living in, and we need to do everything we can to protect ourselves, our families, and our churches, even if it means that carrying our guns to church requires leaving our Bibles behind, said Pastor Robert Jeffress, an evangelical advisor to President Donald Trump. Hwang Jin Moon, also known as Sean Moon, is an American pastor and founder of the Pennsylvania-based Unification Sanctuary Church, also known as Rod of Iron Ministries. Moon's brother, Kook Jin, Justin Moon, the CEO of Car Arms, a gun manufacturing company, is headquartered nearby. Moon typically delivers sermons while donning a crown of bullets and a golden AR-15 displayed before him. He expresses a more militant and pro-gun rights ideology, stating that he was inspired by a biblical passage in the book of Revelation that talked about Jesus using a rod of iron to protect himself and others. He concluded this was a reference to AR-15s and integrated high-powered firearms into regular church services, including wedding ceremonies. Members are also invited to show their willingness to defend their families, communities, and nation by bringing their semi-automatic rifles to church, in which their weapons are blessed. Genesis 9:5-6. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. After a gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, several pastors around the country challenged their conservative counterparts with this question. Are you pro-life if you are pro-gun? What's pro-life about an AR-15? Many people of faith who are tired of years of failed gun violence prevention efforts and grieving the latest mass shooting victims are pointing out what they say is hypocrisy. Conservative Christians pushing to abolish abortion and yet grant unfettered access to guns. Those who disagree contend the real problem is sin. It's not guns, but the evil in people and abortions that kill. One of those faith leaders pointing out the hypocrisy is the Reverend Stephen Marsh, senior pastor of Geneva Presbyterian Church in Laguna Woods, California. I've heard people tell me I'm not Christian because I'm pro-choice. I ask those people, how can you be pro-life and not support getting rid of assault rifles? You can't pick and choose where you want to be pro-life. Christian nationalism is not a religion, but a political ideology based on an extremist read of evangelical morals. However, many Christians denounce it. To be clear, not all evangelicals are pro-gun. There are passionately anti-gun evangelicals, such as Shane Claiborne, a Christian activist who runs an initiative that turns guns into garden tools, a literal expression of the biblical command to turn swords into plowshares. The Reverend Nathan Emsel, executive director and head of campaigns at Faithful America, an online community of Christians organizing for social justice causes, strongly rejects the notion that guns and religion are tied. America is awash in guns and individualism, and that's certainly not in the Bible or the gospel. They started with the guns and they brought in the religion, not the other way around. Reverend Chinetta Goodjoin, who leads New Hope Presbyterian Church in Anaheim, California, said, people of faith must rise up in righteous anger, demand common sense gun regulation. When massacres occur in community spaces like churches, schools, and supermarkets, it tests an entire community's resilience. How can you teach in schools when people are traumatized by gun violence? When a church is no longer a safe place, do I work to enhance security or enhance people's faith? The impact is like an epidemic that touches every fiber of our being. But there is hope. Most religious Americans believe that gun reform is needed to save lives. In turn, religious organizations acting out of a sense of sacred obligation and moral conviction are working to end gun violence through violence interruption programs, education, counseling, advocacy, and more. Faith groups have been among the loudest voices calling for gun violence legislation. They're also working to push back against the harmful ideology of Christian nationalism. According to a study released by Johns Hopkins University, gun deaths in the United States reached an all-time high in 2021, with nearly 49,000 Americans killed by gun violence being the single leading cause of death to children and young adults. The latest data works out to 1 gun death every 11 minutes. As the Washington Post's Paul Waldman put it, if the United States is simultaneously the most religious, wealthy country and the most violent, a lack of religion clearly isn't our problem. Evil cannot be completely eradicated. Gun violence cannot be reduced to zero. Yet there are some reasonable measures that would decrease the number of gun deaths and mass shootings, such as ban assault weapons to reduce mass shootings, have universal background checks, have limits on the magazine capacity, close the private sale and gun show loopholes, have red flag laws, safe storage of firearms, and changes in the way the media and Hollywood portray gun violence, and empowering federal agencies as the CDC to share critical information on, and compile data on gun violence in public health are all sensible measures that save lives. If we could see that reducing gun violence need not disrespect traditions or trample on rights, but rather protect innocent human life, then we could move forward in a productive way. What's needed is a coalition of American politicians and citizens, secular and religious, who value the protection of innocent life above money and power. Without that, the ritual will continue. Horrific deaths followed by thoughts and prayers, calls to return to God, and no change. Finally, a quote by Walter Wink, minister, American biblical scholar, and activist. Violence is the ethos of our time. It is the spirituality of the modern world. Violence is thriving as never before in every sector of American popular culture, civil religion, nationalism, and foreign policy. Violence, not Christianity, is the real religion of America. Thank you.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.